is women. As a female, I beg your indulgence to make a clarion call for an end to and equal focus on the issues attending improved gender equality, even as you put forward strong measures for climate change, global peace, and development. For the stark truth remains that as long as women are left behind, the work being done in all other aspects of peaceful coexistence and sustainable development affect only 50% of the world's population. And that is not our best, as it falls far below human standards as being set by this global world body. As we deliberate over the next several days, may our deliberations reflect the true representation of the people of the world, reflect our true hopes and aspirations, and that our actions will be dictated by the true needs of the majority, which include women and girls. In closing, permit me to express the gratitude of the Liberian delegation, firstly to His Majesty the King and to the Parliament of the Kingdom of Bahrain for all of the courtesies provided to make our stay a very beautiful one. And to the IPU, to the President and Secretary General, and to the Parliament for accepting Liberia back into the fold. We look forward to a strong representation on the issues concerning our one world. Thank you for this time.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and welcome. This is the most important word we may say now. Now you have one more member inside IPU. Thank you. Yes, not a new member, as the Secretary General said, with reason, a returned member. It's always important to also to express it because you are one of the founders of IPU. About the point B, amendments of the practical modalities of the rights and responsibilities of observers at IPU meetings. Then on our last meeting, maybe we will come back about observers, but about the amendments that we needed to have on the practical modalities of the rights and responsibilities of observers, I will give the floor to the Secretary General, because the Executive Committee appreciates the proposal made by the Secretariat and decide to present it here to the Governing Council. I will give the floor to our Secretary General.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, members of Council, I assume that you have received document CL/211/4B-P, which lays out the proposed amendments to the practical modalities governing the rights and responsibilities of observers at IPU meetings. As you have said, Mr. President, the Council did decide that the Secretary General would review those modalities and make proposals to the governing bodies in light of the growing number of requests that the IPU is receiving for granting of observer status to many partner organizations out there. So during the intervening period since Kigali, we have undertaken that review, and the document that you have in front of you reflects the outcome of the deliberations. There, we have sought to clarify under which conditions observer status can be given to a requesting party. And we have indicated, and I believe I know that the Executive Committee has accepted, that such permanent observer status will henceforth be granted upon the recommendation of the Executive Committee following a careful examination of the structure, functioning, mission statement, program of work, and track record of the organization concerned, with a focus on impact and deliverables. Secondly, the amendments give a category to parliamentary observer status, which will be reserved for parliamentary organizations who are, I would say, concurrent with the objectives of the IPU. And this is also consistent with the IPU's ambition and mandate to foster interparliamentary cooperation and dialogue. So there will be a clear category for parliamentary organizations. Thirdly, observers will henceforth be required to pay a token fee for registration. As you know, the increasing number of observers is also having a burden on the parliaments that, or host countries that are receiving our assemblies, and we thought the executive committee agreed that it was important to ask for a token fee, not only in terms of going towards the costs of running an assembly, but in particular to indicate some commitment by those who are observers in the IPU to the deliberations of the IPU. Because in recent years, we have noticed that people come, ask for observer status, and then they disappear, and all you know is they put on their business cards that they're observers in the IPU. So you have agreed that there will be a small fee that will be paid by the observers. However, you have decided to grant exemptions to organizations of the United Nations system, as well as any other partner organizations that are required to contribute directly to the deliberations of an assembly, such as this one. Mr. President, members of council, you also agreed, the executive committee also agreed with the recommendation to restructure the categories of permanent observers as follows. 1, you'll have United Nations and related organizations. 2, parliamentary assemblies and associations. 3, international non-governmental organizations. 4, international political federations. And 5, other partner organizations. By the same token, Mr. President, you and your colleagues of the Executive Committee agree with the recommendation from the Secretary General that we remove from the list of permanent observers those entities that had been dormant over the years and had not showed any signs of life. You remember that you did mandate the Secretary General to reach out to all those organizations to ascertain their ongoing interest in the deliberations of the IPU. Some did respond, others didn't, and you have, excuse me, you have therefore decided to recommend to Council that you strike off that list the International Fund for Agricultural Development, IFAD, and the Organization of American States. But you have also left the door open and said if they want to come back, they are free to apply, and you would then put them under the relevant categories that have just been identified here. So, Mr. President, that is the gist of the amendments that are before Council today, and you may now wish to ask your colleagues to kindly approve them so that we can go ahead and implement them. Thank you.
Thank you for the explanation. We wish that everyone that has a status in our organization will be real engaged with the organization and not just one day and disappear on the day after it. And I think it is a good effort because only this way we will be more active in many fields. So I ask if someone wishes to ask something to the Secretary General. I am not seeing requests. So may I consider adopted the amendments? No opposition? Adopted. And so we are going to the point 5 of our agenda, the report of the President. Allow me to go to the podium to do it in a very short way, and then I will come back here to answer eventual questions that you should raise. Dear colleagues, just a short intervention to make a small presentation of the report about what the President had done during the last 6 months since our meeting in Kigali. It's very easy because it was just a few months, but the headlines of the activity that I proposed was to reinforce the visibility, to support the implementation of the strategy, and of course, to consolidate the good governance of the organization. So, to support the visibility, the most important for me is to attending as many as possible of the list of activities of IPU. Very soon, when our Secretary General will present the report of the impact of our organization, you will understand what I am trying to say. We, IPU, did more than 600 activities during the last year. It means more than one per week. Also, with programs in more than 20 countries. And they are on the ground. And you can't imagine what it means. It means that the staff is preparing it, because when we are realizing one seminar, one event, a forum of young parliamentarians, the forum of women parliamentarians, something about the COP, about terrorism, about everything, a lot of work is behind it, because it is not just appear on the first day. We have a lot of work behind. But also is relevant to express the visibility to the country where we are present and to the others of these activities. And so I visit more than 20 countries during the last months. I was everywhere. But when I visiting the countries, dear colleagues, it's not just to visit or to opening one ceremony or to opening one of the meetings of IPU. I try to go to different universities and talk with students. I try to give so many press conferences as possible to reinforce the visibility of the organization. Because only this way, I always say, we may work a lot, but if no one knows, as we are politicians, it's the same that we are going home. We need to work, but to express to the people what we are doing. Otherwise, people don't know. People will think that the institution on this case, as we, as parliamentarians, are not doing what we need to do. And so, I did it everywhere in all continents. Also, I will talk about two important issues. The Cremi Passi Award that was implemented, and for the first time. We will talk about it later on, because we understood also that we need to have some amendments to our rules, because we need to learn with the first experience, and we did other things that is relevant. We worked to have our ATAN. I hope that next 15 we will approve the final ATAN to the IPU, and it will be played for the first time during our first day of the Assembly in Angola with the national ATAN of Angola, and after it for the future forever. Two main points that headline this intervention: gender participation, youth empowerment, fight terrorism, and fight climate change, and finally, to defend the coexistence that should happen and the solidarity in all countries and in all societies. And this is the headlines of the activity to reinforce the visibility. And also to implement the strategy, because they are linked. When we approve our strategy, we identify the main areas that need to be in our agenda. And so, all the activities of IPU, and of course, after it, the presence and the support of the President will be to assure that it will be implemented as accurate as it should be, and we did it for during the last month in all parts of the world. And finally, the good governance, because we need to talk about how to manage our organization. Because of that, of course, we have meetings of the Executive Committee where many of these things are approved, but also meetings with the Secretary General in person, by video, many phone calls with him, with the different directors of IPU, because we should work as a team. If we don't want to work as a team, the President, the Secretary General, the services, the Executive Committee, we will lose. We will lose. Because it means that one is trying to push the organization to one side and the others will try to push the organization to the other side. But in this case, no. We work together as a team to reinforce the relevance of IPU, and this is most important. In conclusion, very easy to say, it's just if you ask me, what did you do? I will say, I do everything, and I went everywhere that can be relevant to strengthen our organization, to strengthen IPU. Thank you. Before go to the point 2, the report of activity, the B, the activities of the Executive Committee, I will ask if someone wish to ask any question, because we should be accountable always. And I don't want to, I'm not afraid of that, of course. No requests. Thank you for your call. Please.
Nothing alarming, Mr. President, just to applaud and congratulate you on taking IPU to the people of different countries. Presidency is about consultation, it's about communication, and we thank you, and may God be with you, our President.
Thank you, dear colleague. Allow me to compliment, saying that I think we are parliamentarians, we represent the people, we need to be near the people. That's why in all visits, I try to ask the authorities always to go to see the people and to talk with people. It happened in Ramallah, in Palestine. I said to our colleagues, I wish to walk on the streets, to take a coffee, to talk with people. To ask in Peshawar, where I was there, and I wish to visit the hospital and to be within Jeward. It happened last week in Argel, when we went to the south, to Argel, to talk with people that are suffering from the terrorism. Because we will lose if we stay inside our room. We needed to work, of course, but we need also to be near the people and talk directly with them. But thank you so much for your comment, Excellency. About, if I may, go to the point, Ireland, please, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. President, can I first of all congratulate you on your leadership. You have demonstrated the importance of the IPU to parliamentarians, and you've made sure that we as parliamentarians have a voice, but more importantly, you've been a very proactive, active voice for us as parliamentarians, and I want to thank you. You've challenged, you've led in difficult times, you've put forward initiatives that have tried to make our world and our job a better place. And I want to say to you, thank you, because without your leadership, there would not have been an opportunity to try and broker engagement between Russia and Ukraine, and we commend you for your initiative on that. We equally commend you for your initiative on sustainable development, in particular in the conference in New York recently where you led. So can I just say to you, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for your kind words. Sometimes I don't know if this is our friendship that is talking, and so we needed to give the discount for that as well. And so, thank you, dear colleagues. About the Executive Committee, I will say just 4 points that I will share with you. The Executive Committee noted with satisfaction the progress made by the IPU Communications Division with regard on the increasing presence of IPU on social networks and support provided to members and during assemblies. So it was one relevant message. The second one is the Executive Committee renew its appeal in favor of the participation of national parliamentary delegations in UN events as part of IPU commitment to encourage the mobilization of parliamentarians to address global challenge. And allow me to share 2 ideas about it. This is something relevant, and I will say not just for the parliaments, but for the governments themselves. And they need to understand that. Because if they include parliamentarians on the national delegations, the parliamentarians will understand the difficulties of the negotiation process that happened in United Nations. And so the parliaments can have the support of parliamentarians when they are discussing, because the parliament is there with them, but also the parliamentarians after it will understand better that sometimes what government achieve, it is not the perfect, what they wish, the ideal agreement, because in a negotiation process, we never achieve everything a country wishes to achieve. And that's why it's relevant to have the parliamentarians accompanying this process. Unfortunately, there are many governments that don't understand that. And we need to continue our efforts to have parliamentarians in the national delegations that attending UN events. The point 3 is about raising the contributions, and especially we will address the speakers of parliament. That is very important that all countries pay their contributions to the IPU, because it is impossible to work if the contributions are not coming. And so we need to continue our work with all parliaments, but it's very relevant to talk about it. And finally, the Executive Committee expressed its great concern regarding the denial of education to women in Afghanistan. And we condemn this violation of human rights, but what is more important is to create channels of dialogue with the authorities, sometimes behind the scenes, to change the situation. We don't want one award. We want the changing of the situation. If it happened and no one knows this is the role of IPU, we don't care. Because what is more important is the woman, that women in Afghanistan should have the right for education. That is essential, and we will fight for it in a very strong way. And so this is the most important note from the Executive Committee that I will share with you, and I will ask if I may understand that you take good note of that. No requests, so it's taken. Thank you so much. And we go to the point 6. The presentation by the Secretary General of the IPU Impact Report, a very important report that will be presented by the Secretary General. Secretary General, you have the floor, please.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. President. Mr. President, members of Council, I crave your indulgence to allow me to sit while presenting this report. It's because I have a host of documents in front of me and I need to be looking closely to my notes. But I just want to say that it gives me great pleasure and it's a source of pride for us all to present the impact report of this organization for 2022. This is a report that covers the work of the IPU during the first year in the implementation of its strategy, its newly minted strategy for 2022-2026. And as in previous years, we have sought to go beyond just a description of activities conducted by the IPU and look at how these activities are making an impact in the areas of the mandate of the organization. And whatever we have done over the period that we are reviewing today, that is 2022, has been consistent with the mandate dictated to us by the new strategy. I would like, as we present this report, I would like to invite you to view this report in conjunction with what the President has just presented in terms of his activities during the period under review. The President's report is very much part of the work of the organization and should be seen as complementary with what the rest of the membership of the organization are doing through the Secretariat of the organization. So, as I said, our work has been informed, as you mandated us to do, has been informed by the IPU strategy. And just to give you a basic understanding or reminder of what this strategy is all about, we have that diagram that is in front of you. You have decided that your strategy is intended to build parliamentary ecosystems for democracy for everyone. And what you have done is you have identified those actions that you need as an organization to carry out in order to achieve that strategic objective of democracy for everyone. And you will see there in that diagram, Karine, you put that diagram there? Yes, okay. It's there that there are 5 areas where you have identified action that you need to carry out. And for each of those actions, you will see that Parliament is at the center. It is the centerpiece of that action because in your considered view, it is parliaments that are pillars of democracy, the democracy that delivers for everyone. And so we have been working in those 5 areas of building effective and empowered parliaments, promoting inclusive and representative parliaments, supporting resilient and innovative parliaments, catalyzing collective parliamentary actions, strengthening the IPU's accountability. Those are the strategic objectives of this organization as you have identified them. But you have also considered that you need to prove that you are relevant, these actions are relevant, And so you have identified 4 policy areas where you want to test out your action and see whether you're really making an impact. And those are the 4 that you see up there in sky blue. Climate change, which you have considered as #1 priority for the organization. Democracy, human rights, gender, equality, youth participation, peace and security, sustainable development for all. So, Mr. President, members of Council, it is that diagram there that informs the report that I am pleased to present to you today, the impact report. Again, the key word being impact. What have we achieved with the resources of the organization? And you'll see in the report that we have, of course, after describing the activities that we have carried out and the results, we have chosen some case studies to highlight what it has been possible to achieve in those areas. Of course, there are a host of others that we cannot report on here, but that are the information on which are available in different segments of our website and at the Secretariat. A lot of the information is on our website. Mr. President, I just want quickly, because this report has been distributed, I think has been distributed to all, just to point out, I just want to use this opportunity to point out a number of key issues. And when we look at climate change, which is policy goal #1 for you, you will see that this is what's yeah, that's it. You will see that 2022 has been a very busy year for the organization. There's been a lot of things that are being done, and 2023 is going to be another very busy year for climate change. And later this morning, we will be launching the campaign on My Parliament, My Planet, which is intended to amplify parliamentary action for climate change. So you will see in this report that when we are talking about building effective and empowered parliaments, you have been very anxious to promote the issue of human rights. And I would not like to delve in greater detail on this because there will be a report tabled before this Governing Council on the 15th by the Committee on the Human Rights of Parliamentarians, which, as you know, is that mechanism, a unique one that is empowered to examine and defend cases of violations of the rights of parliamentarians across the world. I just want to say that, unfortunately, in 2022, we witnessed a 10% increase in the caseload of that particular committee. Currently, they are seized of some 740 cases in 44 countries around the world, and you will receive a report on that. But we also want to highlight that there have been some positive progress. There has been progress in resolution of many cases. And in this particular instance, I want to single out how the committee's work and the IPU's work in general has led to the freeing or release of members of parliament who had been imprisoned in Sri Lanka. Recently, we have had confirmation from the imprisoned parliamentarians themselves that thanks to the IPU, they have now been released from jail and they are free to go about their daily activities. This is an example of impact that we want to highlight. We have Turkey, where we have a number of cases, and there we have received information that a couple of parliamentarians who were in jail have now been released on humanitarian grounds. I'm sure Turkey will confirm this. Just to say that we make progress, and we want to highlight this as good examples that we need to amplify in other parts of the world. I also would like to single out something that we consider very disquieting, and that is the increasing trend of violence against women, especially women in politics. And in this particular instance, you have in the past been apprised of the conclusions of surveys and reports that have been conducted to try to identify the magnitude of the problem and identify solutions there too. And we have rolled out the findings of these reports in a number of countries in 2022, especially on the African continent, where we have a dedicated study on violence against women in politics. And I wish to recognize the contribution of countries such as Benin, Gabon, Morocco, Niger, Senegal, Sierra Leone, and South Africa. And I would like to add the Central African Republic, the most recent candidate or recruit in the campaign to fight violence against women in Africa, violence against women in politics. I would then like to point out that we do all the time say that parliaments are important. We hear in the speeches that we all make that parliaments have a key role to play. And of course they have a key role to play, but we cannot assume that they all have the capacity to play that role in a similar fashion. And that is why the IPU is dedicated to promoting capacity building for parliamentarians, providing tools for parliamentarians to allow them to perform their duties in a proper manner. So we have the Global Parliamentary Report, the flagship publication of the organization that was published and which helps to identify how parliaments can promote engagement with the citizens in order to capture their concerns and feed this into the legislative process. I would like to also congratulate all of us on what we are doing to promote inclusive and representative parliaments around the world. This is International Women's Week, and during this week, last week, we did launch the annual report. Do I have it here? We did launch a report that we do every year to track progress in women's representation around the world. This report was released last year together with the IPU map on the representation of women in politics. I believe this map is freely available here. If you don't have, we can circulate to you. And Mr. President, yesterday in your speech, you did mention that for the first time in history, there is no parliament in the world where there is not at least one woman. It's a historical fact, and we have to celebrate this. We have to use this as an opportunity to do better, because by the same token, we have witnessed a growth in women's political parliamentary representation, and in 2022, the percentage was 26.5%. This represents a 0.4 percent point increase. The point that we want to make here is that this is the slowest rate of increase in 6 years. And Mr. President, you mentioned that it would take several decades for us to reach gender parity. We actually estimate that you need 80 years at this rate to reach gender parity. I don't think that you want to do that. And very quickly, going through our report, we talk about youth empowerment, where we have a vibrant youth movement, and last year they continue to carry out their work in a robust fashion, not only in the Assembly. We have instituted a youth empowerment series in the IPU, whereby we train young parliamentarians for public office to make sure that they are online. We have launched last year the campaign, I Say Yes to Youth in Parliament. You can see that on the screen, and it's gaining traction because we have some 1,000 leaders across the world who have signed up to that campaign. I do encourage those members here who have not signed up to that campaign to do so. I want now to congratulate, I saw Madam Speaker from Zambia, where there has recently been the establishment of a youth caucus with support from the IPU. We're working with the Zambian parliament to rejuvenate that parliament in all its aspects through the caucus of young parliamentarians. Madam Speaker, we thank you very much for your cooperation in this particular area. We have Nigeria is not present here. There is a vibrant caucus of young parliamentarians in Nigeria with whom we've been working over the years, and to actually make sure that no person is too young to hold public office in Nigeria. So the other important thing that we noticed in 2022 was in the wake of the pandemic. We witnessed that the pandemic had led to an upsurge in the use of digital technology to improve upon the work of parliaments around the world. And there, the IPU itself has sought to implement its own digital transformation. And so you will see that many of those activities that the President was referring to in his report have been carried out using digital technology. We have transformed the working methods in the Secretariat to make sure that colleagues can work remotely. We give access to our documentation in a remote fashion around the world, and I think this is very important. We do have a dedicated mechanism in the IPU, the Center for Innovation in Parliaments, that has been very hard at work promoting networking among parliaments on how we can harness new technologies for the benefit of parliaments. During this assembly, Mr. President, we will listen to the outcome of the deliberations of a very important committee in this organization, which is the the Committee on UN Questions. Last year, you did carry out a review of the way you engage with the United Nations as part of your mandate to catalyze collective parliamentary action in support of global processes. And that committee is being redesigned, reformatted to make it more agile in responding to our relationship with the United Nations. This will be reported on tomorrow, I think on the 14th. Mr. President, let me really conclude, I think because you have the report in front of you, just to refer you to the introduction to my report, which gives you an important glimpse of what it is, our challenges, what we achieved, and what our challenges are. We continue to prosecute climate change as a very important priority for the organization. 2022 was a year where we really deployed the potential of parliamentary diplomacy, and mention has been made of the task force that you established to look into the peaceful resolution of the war in Ukraine. We have singled out the increase in women's political participation, and we have stressed that it is important that we continue to be robust in promoting that. We have also pointed out that the trends in violations of human rights of parliamentarians are not very encouraging, and that we need to be more robust in prosecuting parliamentary solidarity in defense of your colleagues who around the world are victims of violence by all sorts of actors. We have also pointed out that in 2022, we have developed new tools for members of parliament, and during this assembly, we will be launching a report on, I believe, universal health coverage. Here last year, you did launch a report or a handbook for parliamentarians on global health security preparedness, just to give you tools that will allow you to perform very well. So 2023 is the one where we will be focusing on climate change. And as I mentioned earlier, we are going to launch, Mr. President, this campaign for parliaments and the planet. I would like to stop at this particular point, and then you can ask any questions. We will be pleased to field them. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary General, for your report. And for the first time, we have, with the new strategy, we have this impact report, because it is very important to understand what is the impact of our activity and not just what we are doing, the impact of our work. Allow me to share what I expressed also at the Executive Committee, not just a special thank you to the Secretary General and to the Secretariat for everything that was presented, because it means a lot of work, but also about one figure that is, I think, no one like. The number of cases presented at the Committee of Human Rights of Parliamentarians. And dear friends, if we have there one case, it is too much. But when we have hundreds of cases, it's completely a disaster. But I will express also something. Maybe the figures don't show what we are thinking. Because people may think, yes, it means that the situation is worse and worse year by year. Maybe it is not, because what happened is also the visibility and the credibility of this committee and IPU made more people addressing the committee. Because the cases may exist already, but sometimes people don't know that they can apply to this committee to defend themselves in the past. And so the numbers are very small. But now everyone knows around the world that there is a special committee ready to defend them. And so they decide to apply. And I said that at the Committee of Human Rights of Parliamentarians yesterday, and I will repeat here. I never will forget the words of the President of the General Assembly of the United Nations when we address all of us, and especially the speakers of Parliament in Vienna 2 years ago. When he came to address the Speakers' Conference, he used something like these words. Before I became member as President of the General Assembly of the United Nations, I was MP. And in my country, I was detained. I was a political prisoner. And inside the jail, I knew there are someone that will defend me. It is IPU. And now, as President of the General Assembly of the United Nations, I came here to say thank you. This is a very important message from the President of the General Assembly of the United Nations. And so, dear colleagues, I ask if someone wish also raise questions to the Secretary General about his report. Burkina Faso, thank you, because I'm trying, but sometimes I not see the hands raised. Burkina Faso.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, Chair. Burkina Faso would like to take this solemn opportunity to congratulate and thank you for the steps that you and the entire IPU team are taking. We also wanted to warmly congratulate and thank the staff of the IPU and particularly the Secretary General. You have successfully conducted your work and you have a full measure of trust from Burkina Faso. You seek, as you said, to bring parliamentarians together and parliaments together at the IPU. You do that with a sense of diplomatic accomplishment. And we are very thankful. We are confident that this will lead to a successful IPU, and we thank you.
Côte d'Ivoire.
Thank you, colleague. Côte d'Ivoire.
Côte d'Ivoire, c'est là.
Where is Côte d'Ivoire? There you are. Please go ahead.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, President. On behalf of the Speaker of the National Assembly of Côte d'Ivoire and the delegation here, I would like to congratulate the IPU Secretary General and you for this edifying report, which shows the immense amount of work that's being done at this organization towards a better world. I'd like to take this opportunity to say thank you to you and your staff, and to extend words of encouragement for what comes next. You are doing effective work, and we wish to encourage you in that. Thank you. Thank you very much, colleague. Democratic Republic of the Congo.
I'm trying to understand where are Democratic Republic of Congo. Okay. No. Excusez-moi. Senegal, si vous...
Senegal, please. It's your turn.
Senegal. Je ne vois pas Senegal.
I do not see Senegal.
Okay. Je n'avais autre. I will give you the floor to the Secretary General, if you wish to express something.
Thank you, Mr. President. We're very grateful for the very positive comments that have been made by the delegation from Burkina Faso and Cote d'Ivoire, a source of encouragement to all of us. I just want to point out that the bulk of the activities that have been conducted by the IPU have been with the support of lots of you here. We have a small secretariat in the IPU, but we are proud that we can count on the support of our membership. Many of you have been called on to travel to countries nearby or far away in order to represent the IPU in activities that we're organizing on the ground. This is part of your commitment to the organization, and we want to congratulate you on that. I also want to point out that, of course, the resources for implementing the activities that we describe in the report come from you as members of the organization through the contributions that you make to the budget of the organization. And I wish to use this opportunity to thank you again for agreeing to a 3% increase in the assessed contributions to the budget of the organization. But I also want to single out the contribution that we receive from extra budgetary sources from a host of partners out there. I do know that many of the countries represented here, their development cooperation agencies, are giving us resources to do more work, to amplify more work. And I would like to extend my gratitude to Swedish SIDA, the Swedish International Development Cooperation Agency, for their ongoing support to the work of the IPU. Irish Aid is also supporting us. The Canadian Department for Foreign Affairs and Trade, providing a lot of support for IPU activities, and I just want, there are many others that we will identify when we do present our financial reports to you, but I just wanted to use this opportunity of my impact report to thank those that I have mentioned for their substantial contribution to the budget of the organization. Mr. President, thank you very much. And, Mr. President, let me use the opportunity to thank my colleagues in the Secretariat. It is not the Secretary General who is doing all of this work. It is the team that you see in this assembly or who are back in Geneva who are actually doing the work. I'm just the face of the Secretariat. And so I want to thank my colleagues for their unflinching dedication to the organization. And I hope that we can continue to be deserving of the trust of our members. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary General. Before we finish this point and go to the campaign, Parliament for the Planet, and then we will finish the meeting of the Executive Committee because we needed to begin the Assembly. Forgive us the colleagues that came into the Assembly, but the Governing Council began a little bit late, and then we are trying not to delay so much the beginning of the Assembly itself. But Before go there, just allow me to say 3 messages that I will share with all of you. And they are messages from the Executive Committee that directly expressed to the Secretary General. We love the report. It's an amazing one, but please continue to work. Otherwise, people will think, okay, we did it, we don't need to do more. No, it's always possible to improve, and we should have this goal in mind. Second point, the Executive Committee recommended the Secretary General to put in place a database of good legislative good practice. Because sometimes we don't need to create something from zero. If a parliament wishes to legislate in one issue, can ask IPU what are the best practices to combat corruption or to combat human traffic on climate change or something like that. And we should create this easy, friendly consultation of a database, and we use that. And finally, the Executive Committee also recommended that the Secretary General strengthen the evaluation and the monitorization of the activities implemented to consolidate the strategy of IPU. Just with 3 messages, dear colleagues, I think we can go finally to our IPU climate campaign, Parliament for the Planet. Very quick, I will give the floor then to Secretary General and we have a video, but just to say that climate change, it's a reality. Everyone knows that. Second, we don't need to talk about the consequences of that. Everyone knows. It's just to repeat, we may save time. Then, we parliaments, we have a role on that, and we parliamentarians have a role on that. Because when we define our internal policies, we can address if they are climate change friendly or if they don't interfere at all to change the real situation. Also, when we make our budget and how we affect the financial amount of the state budget. And finally, when we, as Member of Parliament, put our government doing what they are doing to implement the Paris Agreement, because they need to be accountable to us as well. And so we have power to change the situation, and we need to use our power and not just talk about climate change and what we need to do. We may act right now. And that's why in Indonesia declaration, we decide that it's time to fight climate change. And this declaration, it is very relevant to all parliamentarians. We should mobilize all parliaments to do it. And also, during the COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh, we addressed the issue, and I believe that in COP28 in United Arab Emirates, we will come back to this issue as well. So, we have a new campaign, Parliaments for the Planet, because planet is our own. I will give you the floor to the Secretary General very shortly, please, and then we will have the video, because many persons are already on the room to begin our assembly.
Okay, thank you, Mr. President. Yes, very quickly, because you have the documentation with you. We just want to, I want to echo what you have said. A lot has been said about climate change. And yesterday I heard the Secretary General of the UN use the word climate chaos. There's a climate emergency, and a lot has been said. But the key word now is action. we should act. We know what the solutions are, and we need to just go ahead and implement those solutions, and of course adjust them as we go along. Otherwise, we will never really get off the ground. And I think that is the purpose of this campaign. The action can start and must start with Parliament, because it is within your power to make change. It is within your power to adopt legislation, policies. It is within your powers to allocate those resources that are required to make change, to save this planet. It is within your powers to make sure that your governments are implementing the requirements of the Paris Agreement, for instance. And so this campaign is intended to spur you to action. Action, first of all, to make sure that you are a model, you are a living example of climate action, which means that the campaign will encourage you to, first of all, reduce your carbon footprint, to be greener, to show that it is possible to do this, to save the planet. And then the campaign is also intended to build capacity for members of parliament, parliamentarians, to deliver on climate action. So it's a two-pronged campaign. We need strong political support and commitment, and that is why this year, in concurrence with your stated priority of addressing the climate crisis, we are launching this campaign so that we can focus during this year on what it is parliaments should do in order to save the planet. Mr. President, do you want us now to formally launch this campaign? This is your copy.
Okay?
So for pictures.
For the pictures. Okay.
We encourage you, members of parliament, to visit the stand. There is a communication stand outside, and please sign up to this campaign. Give interviews.
May everyone has the document that you have in your as well?
You have it?
Because we share it with everyone. Yeah. Yes, okay, you have it.
Okay.
Maybe
So-
watch the video? No?
Yes, I want to see.
Thank you. Thank you, Secretary General. We will pass the video.
My parliament, my planet.
My parliament,
My planet.
Mon Parlement, ma planète.
My parliament.
my planet.
The Kenyan Parliament has done a lot in terms of climate change, adaptation and mitigation.
The Pakistan Parliament is probably one of the first parliaments in the world which became a green parliament because we are totally solarized.
We've taken all the plastic bottles out, all the plastic cutlery out, so we're now a completely plastic-free parliament in the UK.
Most parliamentarians now plant trees in response to a lot of our rivers
La
that are
Commission en
dry.
charge du développement durable, qui a en charge les questions climatiques, a engagé une mission d'information sur les sachets plastiques qui constituent une pollution majeure au Burkina Faso.
There have been steps taken regarding optimization of transport, making sure that our vehicles that we use for business travel are the highest eco standard.
We need money for dredging the lagoons and the ocean and piling it up on the islands, to raise the elevation of the island by 1 or 2 meters, and that will be able to save the islands by another 50 to 100 years.
If we can, as an example, mainstream it in our normal work, then it will make the world a better place.
Mi parlamento, mi planeta.
Mon parlement, ma planète.
My parliament, my planet.
Muy parlament, muy planet.
My parliament, my planet.
My parliament, my planet.
My Parliament, my planet.
Thank you. Thank you all. This is a new campaign of IPU. Please try to involve yourselves in this campaign. We need to help to have a safer planet for our children and grandchildren. Secretary General asked me, please, if it's possible, and if you allow me just to spend more 3 minutes about point 8, future interparliamentary meetings, just because this way everyone will know where will be the future meetings, and we need official approval also to go ahead with different initiatives during this week. And so I will give the floor to Secretary General.
Very quickly.
I'm sorry, Secretary General. I believe that all of you have the documentation with you where with the list of the future meetings of IPU. That's why I think it's easy just to, in 3 minutes we do it.
Yeah, you're right, Mr. President. In 3 minutes you can do it. It's just to point out that we need for you to approve this list of meetings, especially as there is one particularly time-bound decision that you need to take in respect of the host of the next assembly of the IPU. You have that document in front of you, and you will see that it is being proposed that the next assembly take place in Luanda from the 23rd to the 27th of October 2023. If you recall, the Governing Council had decided that this would take place in Geneva. This assembly would take place in Geneva. But subsequent to that, the Executive Committee did receive an offer from the Republic of Angola, the Parliament of Angola, to host an IPU assembly in October 2023. And the Executive Committee did examine this application. We did send a mission to Angola to ascertain that the conditions were there to host an assembly. That mission did conclude that the technical facilities were there. With a few challenges, the Parliament could host that assembly. And Mr. President, you and your colleagues decided, therefore, to recommend to Council that this assembly take place in Luanda, in Angola, in October 2023. We have since been discussing with the Angolan authorities on assumption that you would approve this recommendation from the Executive Committee. And if that is the case, then the Secretary General will proceed to sign a host country agreement with the Parliament of Angola, and you will then meet in Luanda at the end of this year rather than in Geneva. Other than that, Mr. President, the other meetings, normally the specialized meetings that we carry out, many of them have already been approved by the Governing Council. There are a number of them that are seeking your approval, and for each of those meetings, we can guarantee that the resources have been mobilized for implementation. And some of them do not have venues already, but we are working with possible hosts for those meetings. But you can be sure that if we do have all those venues confirmed, those meetings will take place. In line with our digital transformation policy, you will see also that a lot of those meetings are being organized virtually or in a hybrid mode. And so increasingly we will be doing this to diversify access to our activities. So, Mr. President, you may now wish to ask Council to kindly endorse the recommendation from the Executive Committee to hold the next assembly in Luanda from the 23rd to the 27th of October, and to endorse the other meetings that have been identified in this schedule that you have in front of you. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary General. May we consider that the Governing Council approve the suggestion?
Yes.
United Arab Emirates?
I want just to correct, it's Angola, not Rwanda. This is the first thing. The second, the General Assembly 148. The proposed date actually is in Ramadan, and it will be hard for us Muslims, so you have to consider this. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ali. Of course, it's something that we should take in account, and we will try. If we accept that with this small modification, and we will have in Luanda the opportunity to approve the correct date of the meeting of 148th Assembly, because we will try to understand also the venue, if it's available in Geneva, of course. It is not, but it's very important to our colleagues that we need to respect. So, may I consider that we endorse the proposal of the Executive Committee? It is approved. And so, dear colleagues, we'll begin 30 minutes late, but we finish just with 13. So we came back. But the Assembly, we need now, no, not now.
No, not yet.
Not yet. Secretary General, yes, it's very important what you need to express.
We have a procedural requirement that the Secretary General has to ensure is implemented, and that is the announcement of the quorum for this session of the of the Governing Council. Rule 34 of the Governing Council says that for each session, the quorum shall be established on the basis of the number of council members effectively participating in the first meeting. The quorum shall be announced by the Secretary General at that time, and that is what I want to do now. At the beginning of this sitting, we're able to ascertain that in this room were present 142 members of the Governing Council, and so the quorum that has now been established for all deliberations of the Council to be valid will be 72 members present. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Okay. Thank you for the information. Otherwise, what we are deciding will not have value. And so it's much better to assure that we are deciding in accordance with the rules of IPU. So, the Governing Council, we came back on the 15th at 9 a.m. I ask if it's possible. I know that everyone comes from Manama, take a little time to come, but we should begin the last session on the 9th at 9 o'clock. Otherwise, it will be very difficult to have the closing ceremony on time. Please. Today we gave 30 minutes, but I think that on 15 it will not be possible to give more 30 minutes again, waiting for, and now we know that how much is the quorum. It will be easy to begin and to approve everything before people came to the room. And so we will come back on the 15th. Now I will ask 5 minutes to change the table, and I will ask His Excellency, the Speaker of Houses of Representatives, to take the seat, because he will preside the Assembly of IPU. Thank you, dear colleagues. Dear colleagues, Madam Speakers, Mr. Speakers, welcome to 146th Assembly of IPU. I just wish to inform you all, that the Governing Council meeting, during the meeting this morning, decided to elect President of the Assembly, His Excellency the Speaker Al Musalan from the House of Representatives of the Kingdom of Bahrain by unanimity. And so he will preside this Assembly. It's an honor for us to have you in this position, Excellency, and this way I will give the floor and everything will be directed by him after this moment. Thank you, Excellency. Thank you. You have the floor.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim.
In the name of God, the merciful and compassionate, may the peace of God be with us. I would also like to greet the president of the IPU, Mr. Martin Chong, as well, the Secretary General of the IPU. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, heads of parliamentary delegations, ladies and gentlemen, may the peace and blessings of the Lord be with you. We're holding our 146th Assembly in Bahrain, and the slogan concerns the promotion of peaceful coexistence in inclusive societies, fighting intolerance. Any number of societies suffer from extremism, violence, and intolerance, and all this affects peace around the world. Hence the importance of the message which was issued by the Secretary General of the United Nations when he expressly called upon us to work intensely to build societies where there will be more peace, stability, inclusiveness in the absence of extremism, violence, and terrorism. I'm sure the various topics on the agenda of our 146th Assembly of the IPU and the various related meetings are very important. We must work together as parliamentarians who belong to the IPU. We need to work together in order to define a vision that takes account of demands in this tricky period during which we face complicated challenges. Look at what's happening in various countries of the world in particular. And look what's been happening over the last few years. Ladies and gentlemen, for over 2 years, the pandemic spread and had an impact on many sectors. The pandemic wreaked a great economic and social damage. The world has continued to suffer from all these repercussions up until today even. We parliamentarians must work unflaggingly to support efforts by the international community, stepping up multilateral cooperation and proposing common visions in order to launch initiatives and solutions which can trigger sustainable development, recovering from the negative impact of the pandemic. Multilateral cooperation is a pillar that enables us more effectively to reach our common goals. Given the pressing challenges today, and as you know today, we face some major pressing, ever more serious challenges, we must take urgent measures. For example, climate change, which is forcing thousands and thousands of people to move, to migrate. 200 million people may have to be displaced by 2025. Also, this may make the desertification and the lack of water resource more serious. So we have to work together to rise to all these international challenges. All human and material resources should focus on protecting the environment in order to safeguard our future on Earth. Ladies and gentlemen, it behooves us also to think about women and young people. These are topics which deserve our priority attention. We can see this in IPU meetings, and these issues are constantly discussed. Sociological and economic considerations in terms of development are very important, and this will help us to reach equality between men and women. We also need to strengthen opportunities for sustainable development and introduce reforms so the future of peoples and states becomes more prosperous. We must be watchful in terms of human rights. That is a pillar for social justice. Currently, we are discussing very complex subjects linked to the instrumentalization of vulnerable categories like children, orphans, poor people. We must obtain concrete results. We need to achieve results that can then be reflected in the legislations of member countries with a view to putting an end to the exploitation by certain entities or businesses of vulnerable groups, the idea being to attain our overall goals. Ladies and gentlemen, our discussions will make it possible to reinforce cooperation between our different parliaments. We must unite our efforts in order to bring about development and peace in a sustainable, lasting manner. We need to pave the way for dialogue when there are conflicts and put an end to everything holding back international peace and security, like nuclear weapons and other threats that are of concern to our international community. We seek to reinforce mechanisms of work during our meetings. The idea is periodically to see how the results are being implemented in the field. We need to see how our conclusions are reflected in the national legislation of member countries. Thank you.
Mr. President, you have the word. You have the speech.
Mr. President of the Assembly, Madam Speakers, and I see so many, Mr. Speakers, Secretary General of IPU, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, it's an honor for me to address these opening remarks as we discuss a very important issue, how to promote peaceful coexistence and inclusive societies and fighting intolerance. Dear colleagues, our world is in trouble. We all know that. We see so many crises, war, climate change, economical crisis, terrorism, but allow me to say, also a crisis of solidarity, of values. And because of that, people became more inside themselves, thinking that the others are not important. Because of that, social cohesion is in danger, and we have xenophobia, racism, and other forms of manifestation against the other. The speech of hate is everywhere, especially against the most vulnerable groups. But if we have that in real, when we talk about the social media and about digital platforms, we may see that also this is a field where the speech of hate, intolerance, is spread very quickly everywhere and without borders. And sometimes people address, should we regulate it or not? Yes, we should. We are not talking about censorship, but about rules to defend the people, to defend the truth. Allow me to say, some people are asking and say sometimes, but this is a private activity. Yes, it is. But for the security in our roads, the state and the parliaments will legislate about what conditions a car should have to defend security. And that is a private activity. The same issue we may talk about digital platforms. It's a private business, but we should legislate to defend the people. Otherwise, it's a completely open war without scruples and a very pocket that may attack everyone every time. And so we need to understand that we needed to change the things. And that's why we parliamentarians have a special role. We have a special role to try to avoid, this, first of all, the speech of hate between ourselves in our own parliaments, because we know that many people is seeing us as example as well. And if we insult our colleagues that have different ideas, if we don't respect them, while we may talk about tolerance and pacific coexistence. This is essential inside our life, but also when we talk with colleagues from different countries. Here in IPU, we don't need to agree about everything all the time, because we are human beings, and this way we have different ideas, and we need to respect ideas of the others, and we can expose our ideas, defend them, respecting the other. And that's why we needed to do it also to reinforce the role of parliaments and the strength of parliament, because we don't have a democracy without a strong institutions and without a strong parliament. And finally, just to say, we here in IPU defend a peaceful coexistence, a dialogue. This institution won the Nobel Peace Award in the past, defending these values, and these values are more present now during these moments of trouble. That's why this item is so relevant in this moment. That's why this item of discussion is so relevant here in Bahrain, a land where the respect is present. Respect for different cultures, different religions, and this way respecting the other as human being. This is most important, because when we are talking to other person, we need to think it's not it. It's a person. And if we put the personalities, the people, each person in the center of our activity, we will understand our peaceful coexistence and the solidarity that should exist should be in the front of our activity all the time. Finally, to say, I thought, I don't know if I was mistaken, that we learned about what happened the last 3 years. We saw that we had an awful pandemic that killed millions of people. In just a few weeks, a small virus that is impossible to see with our own eyes spread around all the continents, north and south. Different religions, rich and poor, different cultures, everyone suffers. It shows how small is our own, this planet, how small is our world. And only because we have different scientists from different countries, cultures, religions, working together, was possible so quick discover the vaccines to this calamity. I thought we learned from that. We are a very small world. And so we needed to respect and to have a pacific coexistence between all countries, all cultures, and all religions. And we parliamentarians should work every day to achieve it. I believe this is the role of IPU, to put people together. That's why we are here. Work together to fight the fanatism, the xenophobia, the radicalism, and to work together to have a safer and a better world. It will happen during the next days. I believe that. Thank you.
يسعدنا الآن أن نقدم لكم.
It is now our pleasure to present to you our keynote speakers, beginning with Ms. Nazila Ghana, Special United Nations Rapporteur on Freedom of Religion and Belief within the OHCHR. Ms. Ghanea is a prominent academic. She has played a prominent role in advancing and promoting human rights, especially within the Oxford University. She is also a consultant that provides advisory services to all institutions working in human rights. She also advocates for just societies through the promotion and implementation of human rights, including the freedom of belief and religions, but also the rights of religious minorities. We are very happy to have you amidst us. You have the floor, ma'am.
Video.
It is a video statement.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the theme of the 46th IPU Assembly, Protecting Peaceful Coexistence and Inclusive Societies, is a high objective that the international community has pursued for many decades. Parliamentarians have a critical role to play in advancing the promotion of equality and coexistence and the countering of discrimination and intolerance. I regret the circumstances did not allow me to join you in person, but I wanted to share some standards that guide all of us, including my mandate, in seeking to advance these objectives. The 1981 United Nations Declaration on the Elimination of All Forms of Intolerance and of Discrimination Based on Religion or Belief supports us in our definitions. Intolerance and discrimination based on religion or belief means any distinction, exclusion, restriction, or preference based on religion or belief and having as its purpose or as its effect nullification or impairment of the recognition, enjoyment, or exercise of human rights and fundamental freedoms on an equal basis. In turn, religion or belief encompasses thought, conscience, religion, or belief. Human rights standards do not rely on state recognition of who is worthy of freedom, respect, tolerance, equality, and rights. We are all worthy of rights and dignity merely by virtue of being human. It is inherent in us, and state authorities and non-state actors alike have the obligation and responsibility to provide us the opportunity to fully access these. Another set of human rights standards that are critical to the tasks before you at this Assembly are captured in the 2012 Rabat Plan of Action on the prohibition of advocacy of national, racial, or religious hatred that constitutes incitement to discrimination, hostility, or violence. This has allowed the international community to distinguish between unlawful incitement on the one hand and morally reprehensible speech on the other, a distinction that is ever more necessary with the amplification of hate speech on social media and the visible consequences of populism, including by parliamentarians, in hate speech targeting religious and other minorities. Your responsibilities as parliamentarians is unique and critical, and I look forward to seeing the constructive results of this attention in the years ahead as you sincerely and courageously address intolerance and discrimination against all members of society without prejudice or self-interest, and thereby advance inclusivity, coexistence, human rights, and peace. Thank you.
We will now listen to our second keynote speaker for this session, Ms. Maya Franca. Excuse me, says the President. Her Excellency Salima Young was awarded the UNESCO Award for 2022 for her role in promoting tolerance and nonviolence. She works in an NGO and she is head of the Youth Center in Africa. She works within Africans for Peace and Reconciliation, and she provides assistance to survivors of community and sectarian violence to be able to be rehabilitated and reintegrated in their local communities by providing psychosocial support, education, financial, and legal assistance. This Positive Youth Center in Africa provides a wide range of activities to promote youth and to provide e-education to citizens in order to learn how to combat hatred speech online. She is very active. She has had a number of interventions in Chad, Nigeria, Sudan, Central Africa, Togo, and many other countries. We are very, very happy to host you, Ms. Young. You have the floor, ma'am.
His Royal Highness, the King of Bahrain, Mr. President of the Assembly, Mr. President of the Interparliamentary Union, Mr. Secretary General of the Interparliamentary Union, speakers, members of Parliament, members of the Diplomatic Corps, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. It is such an honor to be here today in the beautiful Bahrain and to stand before you who collectively represent the people of the earth. I have always longed for a platform through which I could share my message of tolerance, and behold, the place is here and the time is now. Could we please clap for our amazing hosts and our amazing organizers? Please, let's clap for our hosts and our organizers. Thank you. Once bullied into depression, I searched for peace everywhere until I found it through the divine power of forgiveness. I learned from experience that the peace I was searching for was all the while accessible to me. I also learned that I could only be at peace with others if I was at peace with myself, and that peace is not just the absence of violence, but a state of being and a lifestyle. Since then, I have dedicated my life to advancing tolerance, forgiveness, empathy, and human fraternity as keys to sustainable peace. I come as one, but I speak for many. I speak for the millions of people whom intolerance has rendered physically broken, emotionally shattered, and socially petrified. I stand for the heroes who remain unrelenting in their drive to promote tolerance and peaceful coexistence. We've all had our bouts of trauma and triumph, yet we have made peaceful coexistence more complicated than it needs to be. In our world today, not a day passes without instances of man's inhumanity to man. We live in an era where religion, culture, ethnicity, gender, race, and different ideas have triggered unnecessary conflicts which could have been easily avoided if we just learned to tolerate differences. The statistics are alarming. In 2021, the Peace Research Institute reports that at least 119,000 people died as a result of organized violence, and UNHCR reports that about 89.3 million people were forced to flee their homes owing to conflict and persecution. But unfortunately, Many of us here today are complicit in these monstrosities when we allow greed, envy, and discontent linger in the minds of men unhindered. When we normalize an international space bound by self-interest and an ugly thirst for power. When we neglect and stigmatize mental health, forgetting that mental health is linked to inner peace and productivity. Ills like racism, tribalism, and xenophobia are all born from a distorted mindset and a desire to raise oneself above the other. Popularly dubbed Africa in miniature for its rich culture and biodiversity, my country, Cameroon, which should be a beacon of pluralism, has instead plunged itself into a mire of deadly interfaith and intercultural conflicts. In 2016, in what became known as the Anglophone conflict, separatists in the Anglophone regions of Cameroon came into conflict with the central government. This conflict split my country along linguistic lines and bred tensions between average citizens. To witness this was traumatizing for me because as an Anglophone raised in Francophone Cameroon, I had embraced my dual cultural heritage. I longed for a Cameroon where people would not be judged by the foreign language they speak, but by the content of their character. But as I interacted with victims of the conflict, I knew that this could only be possible when everyone's voice mattered and when everyone had equal access to opportunity. During this conflict, which has been unfortunately neglected by the international community, some of my relatives were killed, and some took up arms and became combatants out of war trauma. I witnessed firsthand the harrowing realities of loss, deprivation, and suffering resulting from the conflict. In 2018, I founded Afrogiveness, which I coined from two words, Africa and forgiveness, to use the unifying language of arts to heal and diffuse tensions between survivors on opposite camps of conflict. I set out to contribute my part to alleviate the suffering of victims by providing basic needs and income-generating training. But I quickly realized how little progress was being made, as most victims were stuck in bitterness, vengeance, and depression. It dawned on me that unless the minds of these victims were healed, our efforts would remain futile and vicious cycles of violence would be fostered. Thus, we decided to empower survivors with the basic resources they needed to not only live in dignity and agency, but also the emotional intelligence they needed to transform pain to purpose, so that even in seeking justice, they may shun violent extremism. This is helping to restore hope, and there is nothing more fundamental to the human spirit than hope. As a trained art therapist, I seek to fill the mental health gap in relief efforts by using the cathartic power of arts to help heal survivors and to puncture the myths that breed bigotry, sow divisions, and trigger conflicts. I have learned that tolerance is not about condoning what is wrong. It is about allowing people the space to be themselves as long as they do not hurt anybody. In 2020, I founded the Afrogiveness Choir, Cameroon's first interfaith and refugee choir, which uses music to heal, connect, and uplift survivors of conflict and intolerance, while enabling dialogue, mutual understanding, and peaceful coexistence. In a recent experience, we had to bridge the gap between three groups of people in the Afrogiveness Choir. One was a group of Muslims who found the use of musical instruments non-permissible, and two other groups, one part Muslim, one part Christian, found the use of musical instruments permissible. This bred tensions between choristers, and we had to find a way for all to coexist harmoniously. So we did our research and came across Halal Beats, a company that creates music with vocal-based soundtracks. We then decided to do two versions of all songs, the inclusive version and the halal version. This satisfied both Christians and Muslim choristers and improved harmonious cooperation within the Afrogiveness Choir. I learned from this experience that we can always find ways to coexist if we really want to. We must find ways to coexist, especially now that we really have to. To quote the famous leader, Martin Luther King, we must learn to live together as brothers, or we will perish together as fools. In our increasingly fragmented but globalized world, it has become imperative, now more than ever, to compel peaceful coexistence as the rule of law. Although about $15 billion is spent on peace-building processes each year, the world continues to know conflict and intolerance. This is an alarm bell that we need to change our approach because we cannot keep doing the same thing and expecting a different result. Fostering peaceful coexistence will require us to change the dynamics of power. The most powerful countries must not be measured by their nuclear force or military superiority, but by their ability to stand for justice and, yes, for love. Changing the dynamics of power will encourage an atmosphere of collaboration rather than competition and will help rebuild trust between peoples, countries, and systems. Dear legislators, in the spirit of nothing about us without us, we count on you to stand for our right to be stakeholders in every law enacted on our behalf and to continue to walk your talk on tolerance. Please urge our leaders to lead by example so that tolerance does not become an empty word that will fade away like a ghost in the morning sun. Two major things can make peaceful coexistence happen: peace education and mental health. As Nelson Mandela said, education is the most powerful weapon you can use to change the world. Peace education can entrench in people values that keep them at peace with themselves, with others, and with nature. For peace to reign, values must become law. Values are like pillars that compel us to do good even when tempted by evil. They keep us secure during trying times, and we all know how petty and intolerant people become when they feel insecure. So, dear legislators, do not feel it is cheesy to enact laws on gratitude, integrity, forgiveness, kindness, and even love. Through peace education programs, we can stamp out the us versus them syndrome and combat victimhood. Peace education can enlighten us on our shared rights and freedom and our common humanity while countering the spread of online hate speech, fake news, and cyberbullying through digital citizenship education. So we urge you, dear legislators, to make peace education a mandatory subject in formal and informal education programs. There can be no peace without mental health. As you can guess, every conflict we experience today was brewed in the minds of human beings. Laws on mental health can prohibit stigma and discrimination against survivors of trauma and mental illness, making it easy for people to seek help before they transfer aggression to others. Dear legislators, ladies and gentlemen, there is a kind of peace that we are yet to behold. There is a version of the world that we are yet to behold. This peaceful world depends on you, it depends on me, it depends on us all. May we please be reminded that peaceful coexistence is a shared responsibility and a collective process which should be nurtured in our minds. To paraphrase UNESCO's most cherished concept, since wars begin in the minds of all, it is in the minds of all that the defenses for peace must be constructed. May I reparaphrase? Since wars begin in the minds of all, it is in the minds of all that the defenses for peace must be constructed. Thank you.
كما تعلمون جيدا أصبح من المعتاد.
As you well know, it has become customary within the IPU to represent viewpoints of women and youth in the beginning of every debate session. So we will first hear from the President of the Bureau of Women Parliamentarians, Ms. Lesia Vasilenko, to give us her keynote address. Ms. Vasilenko, you have the floor.
Mr. President of the Assembly, Mr. President of the IPU, Mr. Secretary General, honorable speakers, deputy speakers, dear colleagues, dear friends. Our general debate is on a very important and timely topic. Discrimination and violence fueled by intolerance and hatred remains rampant in our world. I and the Ukrainian people I represent are witnessing this firsthand every day as our country continues to suffer the consequences of Russia's unprovoked aggression that is ongoing for almost a decade now. Kidnapping of children to erase their identity, sexual violence, rape as a weapon of war, forced migration and separation of families, claims that one language, one culture, one nation has more right to exist than another. These are all examples of intolerance. We suffer them in Ukraine every day. I'm sure many of you not only can relate, but can also extend this list of injustices, both on a national level and on a personal one. But intolerance remains, as it always was, a losing game. Intolerance has always led humanity into the brink of annihilation. It questions the relevance of our social contracts, and this places democracy at risk. Intolerance takes the shape of what perpetrators want it to take. Being a woman parliamentarian and listening to fellow politicians from all around the world, I know that intolerance can take the shape of gender-based violence, including intimidation, threats, beating, rape, and even death. Against this backdrop, we have to stand strong against inequalities and exclusions and promote the fulfillment of human rights for all. And this includes standing for gender equality, women's and girls' rights, and women's participation and leadership in decision-making. The cure to intolerance is inclusion and empowerment, leaving no one behind. Unfortunately, political inclusion is still an illusion. Women form only 26.5% of parliamentarians, 11.3% of heads of state, less than 10% of heads of government, and less than 23% of ministers worldwide. This means that 73% of MPs, 90% of prime ministers, and 77% of ministers in the world are male. This is a model of exclusion. Colleagues, let's be serious. To promote inclusive societies, we have to redress this outrageous imbalance and take every measure to reach a 50-50 parity in political relations and leadership. Our world urgently needs women as role models for peaceful coexistence, inclusive societies, and tolerance. Role models like Jacinda Ardern, the former Prime Minister of New Zealand, who showed what coexistence means after the massacre in Christchurch. Olena Zelenska, the First Lady of Ukraine, who has been an inspiration worldwide, trying to build back better, more just, more inclusive societies. Mia Mottley, the Prime Minister of Barbados, who is an example of climate inclusivity. Maria Corina Machado, a former member of parliament from Venezuela, who fights to restore democracy in her own country so that her people can enjoy a more tolerant and prosperous society. Dear friends, our strength lies in our collective action. And so I wish us all a fruitful discussion which will allow each and all of us to take back home ideas and incentives to promote tolerance, inclusion, and equality in ourselves, our communities, our nations, and worldwide. Thank you.
Thank you. الآن نود أن ندعو رئيسة منتدى البرلمانيين الشباب سعادة السيدة سحر البزار للقاء.
I would now like to give the floor to Mrs. Salana Nassar, President of the Forum of Young Parliamentarians. You have the floor.
Mr. President of the 146th Assembly, Mr. President of the IPU, Mr. Secretary General, Madam President of the Bureau of Women Parliamentarians, fellow parliamentarians, distinguished guests. When my generation looks to the future, it sees many challenges, from climate change and natural disasters to poverty and inequalities and conflict and wars. For us to have a chance to tackle these challenges, we need to work together, all generations, both in our borders and across borders. To work together, we need to leave no one behind and fight exclusion with all our strength. Leaving people behind outside our societies, our economies, our political institutions will lead to more inequalities, alienation, intolerance, and mistrust. It can lead to violence and conflict. Young people are often the first victims for inclusion. Economically, almost a quarter of the world youth are unemployed. They don't have access to education or training. Politically, we only have 3% of the young parliamentarians less than the age of 30. As someone who represents young people nationally and globally, I can say that young people want to work with all generations. And we want to be more included in our societies and in our politics. We young MPs are your allies in bridging the gap. We are closest to our country's youth. We can work with community leaders, and we can work through social media to engage with youth, to build trust, and channel their views and perspectives. As parliamentarians, one of the best ways to promote for the cure of inclusion is to use the tools of I Say Yes to Youth in Parliament. There are two tools today that we can use that matches our assembly. The first one is the importance of implementing the quotas, which we can secure seats for the young MPs on the decision table in our parliaments. The second one is channeling their views and perspectives within the parliamentary work, whether by caucuses or in our youth committees. Ladies and gentlemen, I think now the link between inclusion and peace is clear. It has been repeated over and over in IPU and in UN Security Council, such as the resolution of 2250 and 2535. They all talked about the inclusion and peace. Finally, today, I call on our parliaments. You need to lead by example. We need to see more inclusion. And we, as young MPs, we want to be part of the solution, and we are ready to make it happen. Thank you so much.
شكرا للضيوف المحترمين.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Please.
Then you continue.
كما تعلمون جميعا فإن البند.
You know that item 2 of the agenda is referring to the emergency item at the Assembly. I'd like to remind you that we will be debating this item at 5 o'clock this afternoon. I would now like to give you some information. First of all, we're going to start with the list of speakers for the general debate. We'll begin with presiding officers of the Parliament segment. We have a large number of presiding officers of Parliament, and we must abide by the rules and the timeline for the list of speakers. We start with the speakers of Parliament and then followed by first speakers from delegations. And in terms of who will begin the debate, the committee this morning decided that delegations would have only 6 minutes for their speeches because we have a large number of speakers. Young parliamentarians who are registered for the general debate will have 2 minutes, and observers will have 3 minutes at most. So we would like to ask all delegations to take this into consideration when they give their speeches. I would also like to say that some delegations have still not registered as speakers, so the list will remain open until tomorrow, or rather until Monday at 1 p.m. This afternoon, we'll listen to 2 speakers, 2 representatives of the United Nations, Antonio Vitorino, Director General of the IMO, and Gillian Tregoson, who is the High Commissioner for matters pertaining to refugees. We will have the honor of saying that on Tuesday at 3 p.m. we will have an opportunity to listen to an address by Mrs. Madison, Vice President of the Center for Peaceful Coexistence. I would also like to recall that you can submit candidates for the vice presidency of this assembly. Some delegations have still not submitted candidates to the Secretary General of the organization. I hope that in the course of the days to come, the vice presidents will participate in the management of matters at this assembly. So, to facilitate work and help people undertake their work, they can, of course, call upon the Secretariat at any time. We're going to start with the first speaker on our list, Mr. Simonyan from Armenia, to be followed by Mrs. Dos from Belgium.
Mr. President, Excellencies, fellow parliamentarians, ladies and gentlemen, I wish to thank our Bahraini hosts for their warm hospitality and excellently organized assembly. Climate change, wars and disasters. We're living in difficult times. Humanity must be steadfast in confronting these misfortunes. May I offer my condolences to the people of Turkey and Syria for the loss of thousands due to the recent devastating earthquake that hit these countries. The main principles of coexistence, respect for sovereignty and territorial integrity, equal rights and self-determination, non-interference in domestic affairs should govern the relationships between states. However, we see that these principles are often violated. Peaceful coexistence goes hand in hand with unity which is essential for social, economic, and political stability. When united, individuals and states are more likely to work together to achieve common goals and resolve conflicts peacefully. This creates a stable and harmonious environment for the shared benefit of all. Now let me turn to our region and my country, Armenia, where minorities such as Yazidis, Kurds, Russians, Ukrainians, Assyrians, Jews, and Greeks live side by side as equal members of our society, enjoying their human, cultural, and educational rights. Under a provision of Armenian constitution, 4 representatives of national minorities are members of our parliament. The cornerstone of our international policy is to maintain peaceful relations with all countries. Nevertheless, we face many threats. Tension in the South Caucasus remains high. Since May 12, 2021, neighboring Azerbaijan has violated the territorial integrity of Armenia and illegally occupied approximately 150 square kilometers of our land. Despite the challenges, our goal is to partner in building a sustainable peace. Some say that Armenia seeks to expand its territory. Let me be absolutely clear. Armenia has no territorial claims on any of its neighbors. Allow me to speak about the blockade of the Lachin Corridor, the only road connecting Armenia and the world to Nagorno-Karabakh, which is populated by ethnic Armenians who have lived there for over 1,000 years. The blockade is gross violation of November 9, 2020 trilateral statement, which declares that Republic of Azerbaijan shall guarantee the safe movement of citizens, vehicles, and cargo in both directions along the Lachin Corridor. Blockaded by dozens of Azerbaijani agents masquerading as environmental activists, the road has been inaccessible to civilians and commercial traffic since December 12, 2022. The situation has left approximately 120,000 ethnic Armenian residents of Nagorno-Karabakh without access to essential goods and services. They have been deprived of life-saving medication and health care as humanitarian aid delivered by the Red Cross and peacekeepers has not met demand. Disruption to the supply of electricity and gas have created extreme hardship. On many nights, the people of Nagorno-Karabakh are subjected to deafening calls to prayer and spotlights beamed at their homes. Azerbaijan recently posted a video falsely showing Armenia supplying arms to Nagorno-Karabakh, but Azerbaijan does not limit itself to disinformation and the persecution already described. Just days ago, on March 5th, 3 Nagorno-Karabakh police officers were killed and another wounded in the pre-planned ambush ordered by Azerbaijan. Esteemed colleagues, I ask, is this not ethnic cleansing? As we know, intolerance, demonization, and violence directed against people based on their race or religion must not be condemned. In the words of Nelson Mandela, no one is born hating another person because of the color of the skin or his background or his religion. The looming catastrophe in Nagorno-Karabakh has rightfully drawn attention. The European Court of Human Rights appealed measures against Azerbaijan over the blockade. The Council of Europe Commissioner for Human Rights urgently called for it to be lifted. Amnesty International, the European Union, and the Helsinki Commission have independently called for an immediate end to the blockade. On February 22, 2023, the UN International Court of Justice ruled that Azerbaijan must ensure unimpeded movement through the Lachin Corridor. In a separate ruling, the court unanimously rejected Azerbaijan's false claim that Armenia had planted mines. Azerbaijan authorities insist that the Lachin Corridor is unblocked. The grave reality on the ground, however, tells a different story. To conclude, I firmly believe that democracy, the rule of law, respect for human rights and peaceful coexistence are the pillar upon which humankind should live in peace and harmony. Thank you very much.
Stihos from Belgium can take the floor, please.
Belgium has the floor. Mrs. Dos.
To be followed by Bonda from Syria, Syria. Sierra Leone.
Dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, this year in Belgium, we celebrate a very special birthday. Not my own, because that one happens to be coming around every year. And I must say personally, I found it happens a bit too often. No, this birthday is something quite special. This year marks the 20th anniversary of same-sex marriage in Belgium. We were the second country in the world to allow it nationwide. And it was a victory for two big reasons. First of all, it was a moral victory for all Belgians. In a free society where people are born equal, all people must have the right to build their private lives however they want. Your love for one another can and should never, never be a reason to become a second-class civilian with fewer rights than your neighbor. It should go without saying that equality implies freedom for all, not for some. But secondly, it was also a victory for humanity. And I do not say this lightly. Only last month, Andorra became the 34th country in the world to legalize same-sex marriage. One of the more compelling arguments were the positive evolutions in countries. People are happier, people are safer, and more prosperous in equal societies than in societies where law discriminates. And that is only logical, dear colleagues. A recognition of same-sex marriage, which is a recognition of love is love, no matter who the people in love are, is a step towards open and tolerant society. In open societies, people don't have to be afraid to walk in the streets. They don't have to hide who they are when they apply for a job. They can be happy in their relationships with family and with their friends. Same-sex marriage does this. It opens our eyes and shows that the rainbow community exists and there is nothing, and I say nothing, abnormal about it. This has the largest long-term impacts: visibility. 20 years ago, we gave an example of what is possible if we allow people in the rainbow community to be themselves, to be equals. And I must say, dear friends, our society didn't collapse. On the contrary, we became collectively happier. Have we reached a perfect society in Belgium? Of course not. Every now and again, our country is shocked by savage acts of violence against the rainbow community, both verbally as physically. 2 years ago, we even had to mourn a man who was murdered because he was gay. We also know that suicide rates in the rainbow community remain terribly high, much higher than in the broader population, because acceptance of a different sexuality remains difficult in certain communities. And even more heartbreaking, it often happens that elderly people go back into the closet when they go to a retired community. So yes, absolutely yes, we have to keep developing initiatives to stimulate acceptance and integration of people in the rainbow community. But most of all, we cannot cease our fights. In the grander scope of things, equal rights have only just arrived, and only in some parts of the world. It is our duty, as representatives of the people, to further the cause, to fight for their freedom, to defend them, and to show them how much and how we care. Political acceptance is the first step towards an accepting society. So, this is my call to action to you today. Let's talk about the rainbow community. Let's treat them as equals. Let's lift all the restrictions that past generations have posed upon them, and let's celebrate love. You couldn't give me any gifts more beautiful than that to celebrate the 20th anniversary of same-sex marriage in Belgium than to say yes to love. I thank you all.
Thank you. Mr. Bando from Sierra Leone is absent, so Mr. Birla from India can take the floor, please. Followed by Mr. Ahmed Sabadi from Jordan.
Honorable Chairperson,
IPU की जनरल असेंबली के अंदर पधारे सभी प्रतिनिधियों का मैं अभिनंदन करता हूं।
I extend a warm welcome to all honorable delegates gathered here. Namaste. Today we are deliberating on promoting peaceful coexistence and inclusive societies, fight against intolerance. This subject, in my view, is very topical, relevant, and important. I'm taking this opportunity to present India's view here. Honorable delegates, today India is the largest functioning democracy on the planet. India is being recognized as the mother of democracy. The roots of democracy in India go deep into the ancient times, and the democratic ethos have guided our way of life. India is a very rich, diverse culture. Ours is among the most comprehensive constitution in the world, which is based on the ideals of liberty, equality, and fraternity, and principles of social, economic, and political justice for all. It embodies the values of tolerance, multiculturalism, and peaceful coexistence of all the religions. Our country has been the cradle of many religions. Followers of different religions, faiths, and cultures have coexisted peacefully and flourished in our country for thousands of years. Distinguished delegates, our country upholds the principle of Vasudeva Kutumbakam, which means the whole world is one family. We believe that working for all world and welfare should be the cause of us, all of us. The theme of G20 under India's presidency, One Earth, One Family, One Future, share the same motto. The Constitution of India provides freedom to practice the religion of choice along with social, economic, and political freedoms. We are proud of our diverse culture and rich heritage. Cultural and social diversity and pluralistic ideology have been the biggest strengths of our democracy. Distinguished delegates, democracy in our country has gone from strength to strength in the last 75 years. The increasing percentage of voters, which now exceeds 900 million voters in our successive election, reflects the fact that people have continued to repose in our system of democratic governance. Distinguished delegates, in India we have a robust participatory democracy and a vibrant multi-party system. Our parliament is a forum where hopes and aspirations of the citizens find expression through the elected representatives. All representatives enjoy the freedom to express their views and thoughts in the parliament. Honorable delegates, during the 75 years of our democratic systems, our parliament has worked relentlessly with the spirit of collective efforts, inclusive growth, shared trust, and the concerted endeavors to bring about social, economic transformation in the lives of our people. We have worked diligently and with utmost dedication towards the realization of sustainable development goals, with the aim of ensuring the welfare and upliftment of every section of the society, particularly the economic weaker sections, youth and women. Our government has implemented various schemes targeted at improvement in education, health, housing, and skill development. Backward districts of the country have been identified as aspirational districts to provide them with focused attention in order to put them and bring them at par with their developed counterparts. These efforts have borne rich dividends. This only reflects our commitments towards people-centric governance and resolute action for bringing about a more egalitarian society. Honorable delegates, in the changing scenario, we firmly believe that all global issues can bring and should be resolved peacefully through dialogue. The Parliament of India has always held extensive and meaningful debate and deliberations on contemporary global challenges such as climate change, gender equality, sustainable development, and COVID-19 pandemic. Honorable delegates, global institutions propagating peace, harmony, and justice are crucial for peace, prosperity, and sustainability, and a just world order. In global institutions like the UN Security Council, there is a broad consensus among many nations to bring about reforms to reflect the realities of a rapidly changing world order. We believe this important matter requires serious discussion. Reforms in the UN Security Council cannot be delayed any further. It is crucial that the subject is included in future global agenda so we can contribute more and more in addressing challenging such climate change and sustainable development, etc. Honorable delegates, we are of the opinion that inclusive development can promote peaceful coexistence and tolerance in society. By the way of eliminating various socio-economic anomalies, we can further strengthen people's faith in democracy. Distinguished delegates, before I conclude, I would like to say that India has always given the message of peace and harmony to the entire world. We believe that building inclusive and tolerant society is only possible through peaceful coexistence and mutual discussions and dialogue. Our parliament have a decisive role to play in this regard. Let us all come together to build a better future for harmony. With these words, thank you so much.
مع الرئيس أحمد صبري تفضل.
You have the floor, sir.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على النبي العربي الهاشمي.
In the name of God, the compassionate, President of the IPU, President of the Chamber of Representatives of Bahrain, Secretary General of IPU, ladies and gentlemen, members of delegations present here. I would like to greet you on behalf of Islam in the name of peace. May peace and compassion be with you. This is a message which was revealed to Prophet Muhammad And the messenger of God brought this revelation to the world. He spread the values of compassion and good with a view to promoting the values of peace and coexistence. I started by talking about the values of Islam because I wanted clearly to state that Islam has suffered greatly. Muslims have suffered the most. They have been massacred by terrorists, and the world should not have double standards in this respect. Terrorism knows no religion, as we have all seen. Bloody events have taken place in the Middle East, perpetrated by Daesh in the name of Muslims. We also bore witness to extreme terrorism, which has affected churches and mosques in many countries around the world. And here I must say that we must fight against intolerance and extremism together with terrorism. This calls for coordination in international action. This position was expressed by our king when he called to combat obscurantism from all stances, be it military, social, or what have you. Ladies and gentlemen, the title of our conference is of paramount importance. We are calling to promote peaceful coexistence. This is a noble goal, and we greatly need such coexistence today because there are more and more speeches based on hatred. We have all been saddened by what has occurred in Turkey and in Syria following the earthquake which hit that region. The international community has a moral commitment to meet the needs of refugees and welcome them. The world is facing increasing numbers of challenges. Poverty is spreading through many countries of the world. Having said this, it is our duty to shoulder our responsibilities as parliamentarians and reinforce coexistence in 5 areas. First of all, we have to adopt clear-cut stances in Parliament in order to provide for condemning any speeches based on hatred of other religions. There should be freedom of expression. This is often invoked by some in order to refuse the right to certain religions to raise their voices. Extremists have burnt the Quran. This is an extremist threat to Muslims around the world. Second, it's very important for the media and social networks. It's important for search engines not to spread content that might incite hatred. Also, we should put an end to supplying weapons to certain regions like the Middle East. This region should be free of any weapons of mass destruction, in particular nuclear weapons. And fourth, we need to unite our international efforts to combat extremism and terrorism and promote development programs, education, health, and cope with the lack of water and medicinal drugs in many countries of the world. It's necessary to foster dialogue to resolve conflicts and disputes, refuse intolerance, promote initiatives designed to strengthen the values of coexistence, tolerance, and respect for others. Ladies and gentlemen, all the ideas which are being proposed at this assembly should be implemented. If only half of these initiatives were rolled out, it would be possible to embark on the right path. We could push away the specter of war. Palestine is located in our region, and we have not found a fair and global solution to the Palestinian problem. Palestine has not been granted the right to become a state. Jerusalem has witnessed any number of violations in terms of the Middle East and Palestine. I would also like to say I'm proud to see our King, Abdullah II, act as guardian of the holy places in Jerusalem. He shows us the path of moderation. He has always been firmly convinced of the eternal rights of Christians and Muslims to live in this holy city. In Jordan, Jordan is an example of a state where Muslims and Christians have lived happily together. We are convinced that Arab Christians are part and parcel of our culture and civilization, our Arab and Muslim civilization. Hand in hand, we have built our state. We have rung the church bells and heard the sound of church bells mixed together with the call of muezzins. In Jordan today, on the banks of the Jordan River, we have the place where Jesus was baptized. This is a symbol of coexistence between the various religions. In this manner, we have created understanding amongst peoples around the world. Could you wind up, says the chair? We have refused intolerance. We have endeavored to foster harmony. And we have launched an initiative called Living Together, which advocates coexistence between Muslims and Christians. I would urge all the participants at this conference to support peace as mentioned by the Council of the Shura. We should include this item on the agenda of our conference. In our emergency item, we should criminalize speeches based on hatred, promoting hatred between people, and promote international peace, security, and coexistence. Ladies and gentlemen, Bahrain is a country which is dear to our hearts, and I would like to thank the government, the parliament, and the people of Bahrain. I would like to thank them and say that I'm very grateful for their able organization of this assembly. I wish our conference every success in its work, and in conclusion, I would like to say once again that may the peace of the Lord be with us. Thank you.
Mr. Farouja from Malta, followed by His Excellency Ali Saleh from Bahrain.
Excellency, Chair of the Assembly, President of the IPU, honorable colleagues, distinguished parliamentarians, keeping peace and promoting peaceful existence is a continuous process, one which is not limited to a particular geographic region or point in history, but is rather a universal journey requiring joint and innovative tools. It is crucial to transform words into action and be open to different beliefs and creeds. Therefore, I emphasize very strongly the importance to recognize that tolerance and peace are not abstract, unattainable concepts applicable only to certain countries or political realities, but are universal notions that should form the basis of our every policy and also, I must admit, the legal shape. Moreover, I emphasize that tolerance and peace necessitate a reciprocal approach and a wholehearted participation by each and every one of us. From the youngest members of our societies to our elderly members of our population, from the remote farmer working the land to the urban business CEO, we are all to hold the potential to be ambassadors for tolerance and peace. Distinguished colleagues, as elected representatives of our respective communities, parliaments enact legislation and are in direct contact with their respective constituents. Therefore, members of Parliament are instrumental to promote peace and foster fundamental values of non-violence, respect, and openness to others' tolerance, solidarity, and peace. I come from a very small island called Malta, a state in the center of the Mediterranean, in which politicians keep constant contact with their constituents. Even though it is not legally binding, Malta has one of the highest turnouts in elections as citizens follow very closely national politics. It is therefore more important for politicians and members of parliament to feel this responsibility, to act and speak in a respectable way. Malta, as you know, is right down in the center of the Mediterranean, a sea which is surrounded by different contentions, by different continents, different cultures, different and diverse economic, geographic, and social realities. Unfortunately, it is a region which is afflicted by way too long by conflicts. Malta, since its independence and later as a neutral state, has always advocated peace in the region. I recall way back in history 1975, during the meeting in Helsinki by the Conference of Security and Cooperation in Europe, Malta alone advocated for an inclusive political dialogue, thus promoting the participation of all the southern Mediterranean states. In the years that followed, Malta continued to be a beacon of neutrality and facilitated the organization of numerous meetings and events aimed at promoting dialogue and peace. As members of parliament, we also have an important role to use parliamentary diplomacy as a catalyst for the propagation of tolerance and peace. Interparliamentary participation should serve to strengthen dialogue and provide us with the possibility to discuss and act in a timely way where elements of intolerance and hate seep into our discourse and communities. Malta hosts the Global Council for Tolerance and Peace. The Council began as a window for tolerance and spreading peace and notable human objectives and noble ones. It is developed into an international organization that relies on democratic principles in order to teach true and sustained peace for human mankind through the spreading of culture of tolerance between all countries. The Maltese Parliament is now also engaged in the activities carried out by the Global Council, and in June this year, in 3 months' time, a conference will be held in Maltese Parliament building on tolerance and peace in the Middle East and North African region. Finally, on an international point and level, IPU can serve as a very good platform to promote peace. A year ago, when we met in Nusa Dua and adopted a resolution entitled Peaceful Resolution of the War in Ukraine, respecting international law, the Charter of the United Nations and territorial integrity, that resolution, as you know, recommended that a task force on the situation in Ukraine is established to facilitate the role of parliaments in formulating feasible, peaceful solutions. It is crucial that we continue to seek tangible results through the work of this task force. Colleagues, I would like to conclude by sharing with you a very short but very meaningful sentence by a wonderful person who practiced peace by sharing love with others through her life experience, the late Mother Teresa of Calcutta. If you have no peace, it is because we have forgotten that we are holding each other. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. معالي الرئيس علي صالح بحرين تفضل. Followed by Mr. Miara.
Chair Ali Salaha of Bahrain.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim.
In the name of God, the Merciful, the Compassionate. Ahmad bin Salman al-Muslim, President of the Bahraini Chamber and President of the 146th IPU Assembly. Ladies and gentlemen, may God's peace and blessings be upon you. I'd like firstly to welcome you to the Kingdom of Bahrain. We are delighted to welcome you here, and you are honouring us with your presence. You are honouring us by holding your meeting in this country, which has always been recognised as a crossroads of cultures and civilizations. We are a crossroads of religions. We are a focus for peace, coexistence, tolerance and dialogue. I'd also like to thank wholeheartedly our King, the leader of our democratic process. I am speaking, of course, of His Majesty King Hamad bin Isa Al Khalifa, the King of Bahrain. May God protect him. He has installed a parliamentary culture that is rich in discussion, enlightening ideas, and discussion of various issues and topics that will be discussed by the parliaments of the world here. Ladies and gentlemen, the Kingdom of Bahrain is currently launching a number of initiatives. They stem from our conviction and our trust that human beings, mutual respect and moderation and tolerance are pillars that are enshrined in the constitution of the Kingdom of Bahrain. The King has set up the Hamad Center for Peaceful Coexistence, which is a milestone. This milestone is a shining light in our history. We have bolstered the values of coexistence and humanity, and we have disseminated peace around the world. We have striven to counter intolerance in all its forms. We are currently holding this conference, which aims to look at promoting peaceful coexistence and fighting intolerance. And we would like to reiterate the call that was issued by His Majesty the King of Bahrain at a meeting of the international community to strengthen legislation to incriminate hatred and disrespect for religion, as well as racism in all its forms. We feel that we should draw inspiration from the statement made by the Kingdom of Bahrain, which was contributed to by the King of Bahrain, who has also opened a center that will make it possible to establish the guiding principles that will allow us to achieve the goals that we've set for ourselves with regard to sustainable coexistence for all the peoples of the world. In light of the slogan that we've chosen for this conference, we support the emergency item that's been put forward by our dear brothers from Qatar, which seeks to incriminate the propagation of hatred among peoples and disrespect for religions, and we hope that this conference will agree to debate that emergency item, because that's a pressing need today, particularly given the circumstances that are arising around the world. In response to a call from the Crown Prince and Prime Minister of the Kingdom of Bahrain, who called for parliamentary diplomacy as a means of disseminating peace and coexistence throughout all international fora. We, as parliamentarians, must work together. We must work together to achieve cross-cutting legislation that will act as a roadmap for promoting the roles of parliaments in societies. We must work together to strengthen coexistence and solidarity among peoples. We should move away from religious divisions and community-based divisions. There is an urgent need today more than ever to stress the need for a focus on human beings. We need to invest in human intelligence. We need to ensure that human beings are a key part of the efforts being made to create inclusive societies that will enable us to contribute to global development and achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, particularly as we see the crises that humanity can face. I'm thinking of natural disasters, the effects of climate change, wars, armed conflicts, and the threats posed by food and water security. In light of all of these, we need to achieve solidarity among all tracts of the global population. And that's why we hope and pray that today we will, more than ever, be able to strengthen our efforts towards peaceful coexistence and tolerance among all the peoples of the world so that we can overcome those challenges. In conclusion, allow me to thank the Interparliamentary Union. Thank you for choosing the Kingdom of Bahrain as the venue for this assembly. I'd also like to thank all of you for being here, for participating in the work of this assembly. May the peace and blessings of God be upon you. Thank you, Mr. Salah. Mr. Mayara of Morocco.
Last speaker of this session, and we'll continue at 2:30.
In the name of God, the merciful, the compassionate. Peace upon our Prophet and his companions. Bahraini Speaker, President of the Shura Council, Secretary General, President of the IPU, heads of delegation, ladies and gentlemen, in my personal capacity and on behalf of the parliamentary delegation of the Kingdom of the Kingdom of Morocco, I'd like to thank the Kingdom of Bahrain to explain our gratitude to them and to His Majesty the King, the Parliament, the government, and the people of Bahrain. We thank them for their warm welcome. We would also like to salute the excellent way in which the work of this assembly has been organized. Furthermore, we'd like to congratulate you on the choice of topic for this general debate. This is a theme that will enable the parliaments of the world and our partner organizations to discuss very timely issues, very pressing matters, and there is a link there with our collective fight to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030, to bolster peaceful coexistence and encourage tolerance. Of course, this assembly is a key event because it's being held at a time when there are many difficulties at the international, regional, local levels. Today, we can see a number of repercussions echoing around the world. For example, the exacerbation of the situation in Ukraine and the worsening of the socio-economic situation around the world as a result of the pandemic. On top of that, we see the fallout from climate change, which is jeopardizing the entire world in a serious way. We can see famines unfolding in some regions of the world, particularly in Africa. And we're alarmed by the worsening situation regarding food security, all of which is leading to an increase in conflict around the world. International organizations must concern themselves with this, and we are indeed concerned by a number of hotspots in a number of geopolitical regions. Ladies and gentlemen, hatred and intolerance feed on separatist movements that are becoming more widespread. And this is worrying in a number of regions of the world, particularly in ones where there is food insecurity. I'm thinking specifically of the Sahel region and sub-Saharan Africa, where various challenges are being faced today. Those challenges are impacting an ever greater tract of the continent, and that's why we need to pool our efforts as an international community to assist that region and to lay the foundations of peace and coexistence by eliminating the deep-set causes of intolerance and hatred. That will pave the way for lasting societies. Yes, Chair, we must ensure that the voice of dialogue is heard. Dialogue among cultures and civilizations in particular. The Kingdom of Morocco is one of the founders of an alliance for civilizations within the United Nations, and we applaud every effort that's been made to strengthen peace and to ensure that the values of humanity are respected. On the basis of the work that's already been done, we would like to preserve the status of Morocco as a land of coexistence and openness. His Majesty the King has emphasized all of this. He did so in a message that he gave to that UN alliance. He said that it's very key today to combat climate change and terrorism, and we must make every possible effort to achieve sustainable development, food security, water security, and development in general. To that end, we must go back to the basics, which involves coexistence. We can never achieve anything good if we launch new projects without that coexistence, which is such a key link in the chain that enables human beings to be at the heart of the world's humanity. We would like to say that we are in harmony with the slogan that's been chosen for this conference, and we call upon everyone here to support Qatar's proposed emergency item, which seeks to criminalize all forms of religious disrespect. Here in Manama, we call upon everyone here to recall our desire to host the conference on dialogue among religions. That meeting will be held in June in Marrakesh, and we look forward to hosting you in Marrakesh on that occasion. Until then, thank you once again to the Kingdom of Bahrain under the leadership of His Majesty King Hamad bin Isa Al Khalifa, the King of Bahrain. We thank Bahrain for its generosity and hospitality, and we wish the Bahraini people even more prosperity and development than they've already seen. We hope that at this conference, at this assembly, we'll achieve a great deal of success. that will lead to the socio-economic development of all countries in the world, and set up the values of peace, coexistence and tolerance around the world. Those values are ones that we've always reiterated, because only through peace can we achieve the countries that we want to achieve. Thank you, and may God's peace be upon you.
Thank you, sir.
For this session.
Díomh Corda, mar Cathaoirleach Shannon Éireann, some Bowl Parliament na Héireann, is cúsmór an bheith an seo ag glótling an uv an tábhar úntach seo agus an háchtach. Mr. President, Mr. General Secretary, dear colleagues, it is important that we listen as we assemble today to speak on promoting inclusivity, peace, and diverse, inclusive societies. Our world is at an inflection point, and we as parliamentarians have a sacred duty to lead and to act responsibly. If we are really serious about what we're doing here today and this week in Bahrain, promoting peace, building an inclusive society requires leadership. It requires us to challenge each other. It requires us not just to talk, but to act, because leadership requires action. And that can be done through our legislative programmes. Ireland takes its role very seriously. Since 1958, we have engaged in peacekeeping missions around the world as part of our UN mandate. In our legislation in our Parliament, we've introduced incitement to violence and hatred legislation, and just recently, online safety and media regulation. Dear colleagues, Ireland today is a modern and inclusive society. It's a welcoming country. I stand before you as an openly gay man, as the first Speaker of both houses of the Irish Parliament, as a member of the LGBT community, and we have a gay Prime Minister in Leo Varadkar. And we were the first country in the world to vote by popular vote for marriage equality. Dear colleagues, can I challenge you all and us all today? The Global Peace Index from last year reveals that we live in a world that's becoming more divided, less tolerant and less peaceful. Why is this the case? What does this say about us and our roles as parliamentarians? As I said, we have a duty to lead, to remove intolerance, to fight hate crime, to stamp out discrimination and prejudice, and it's through us as parliamentarians that that battle begins. Last night our President challenged us in his opening address when he spoke about us matching our pledges to create tolerant and inclusive societies through actions. Friends and colleagues, there can be no more obfuscation. Our world, as I said, is at an inflection point. Today and this week in our Assembly, our duty is to reaffirm our commitment to peace building, to gender equality, to climate change, to the promotion and upholding of human rights, and to the upholding of democracy in the holding of free and fair elections, and especially to the encouragement of our female and women colleagues in running and being elected to parliaments. Finally, Mr. Speaker, we must support the people of Ukraine in this illegal war. We must commend our President for his initiative, and as parliamentarians in a global world, we must insist that the urgent voice of the people of Ukraine is heard at all times. Thank you very much indeed. Mr.
Secretary General.
Thank you, Mr. President. You did indeed announce that the Irish speaker would be the last speaker for this morning's session. And before you rise for lunch, I have to make a procedural announcement regarding the quorum. In conformity with Rule 33 of the Assembly, for each Assembly, the quorum shall be established on the basis of the number of delegations effectively participating at the first plenary meeting. The quorum shall be announced by the Secretary General at that time. We have ascertained that in this room there were a number of delegations present to the tune of 125. The quorum has therefore been set at 63 delegations for the deliberations of this Assembly to be valid. Thank you, Mr. President. I do understand that my colleague, Ambassador Philip, has an announcement to make before we break off for lunch. With your permission. Yes.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. We have an announcement for the members of the Africa Geopolitical Group and the members of the Africa Parliamentary Union. You are kindly requested to remain here in this room for another 10 minutes. The chair of the Africa Group has an important and very urgent announcement to make that concerns your group. Thank you very much. And the distinguished speakers of Parliament, you will have received a nominal invitation for lunch. It takes place right outside the main hall on the right-hand side, the VIP restaurant, and it will start shortly. The session resumes at 2:30 p.m.